Hi, Charné. I hope you're doing great today. First of all, thank you so much for being on our podcast today. How are you today?
Thanks so much, Karina. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on the podcast. It's such an honor. I'm doing so well. Thank you.
How is the weather like in South Africa?
It's boiling hot here today. We've had a bit of a heat wave, which we are so grateful for. So the beaches are packed and the tourists are still enjoying and soaking up the sun. And summer's in full swing for sure.
And we are waiting for you the next time when you're coming to Switzerland.
I cannot wait to come to Switzerland. I was really interested in coming to the World Economic Forum. My timing just didn't work out so well, but next year or this year coming, I guess, I'm absolutely going to make my way to Switzerland for sure.
How can we actually improve regulations and to make sure that there's more transparency and there's more understanding, but especially focusing on Web3?
Yeah, I think right now where the laws are and where the technology is, we are, not quite where we should be in terms of the overlap, but there's so many amazing opportunities now for businesses to incorporate the technology to match where the current laws are. So when, you're incorporating smart contracts or the decentralized technology, whether it be in finance or healthcare or education, there's so many overlaps from the laws that are currently in place, which is the digital signatures and understanding the terms of the contract. So if the parties both agree to, purchase and sale and things like that, as simple and as clean as those sort of transactions are, those efficiencies can be accelerated with the technology and you don't need to go through third parties. But the tricky part comes where maybe one person wants to amend the contract and now it's in a smart contract, and how do you amend a smart contract? So you'll be able to essentially delete that and refresh and start with another contract anew and make sure that the terms are what you are happy with. This can obviously cause a few issues such as loopholes in contracts and you not being able to have a paper version or digital version that is in plain language for you to be able to look back to refer if it's at a later stage. But this is the part of the technology that's so beautiful, is because it will integrate with what we are already using, as well as speeding up any sort of backlogs and efficiencies. So if two parties would like, especially the regulators, if they would like to refer back to case law, but they're using paper still and they're going to court, and how do they implement the tech now, is a way to digitize that and to make sure that that case law has been validated or verified, and they'll be able to implement that with either artificial intelligence as well as putting it on the blockchain through a smart contract. So there's so many incredible ways to allow the two worlds to meet, and it really is the responsibility of the industries to make that happen, so that the policymakers and the law enforcement, they're able to understand it, because they'll need to rely on the expertise of industries who are using it on a day-to-day basis and making the most of that technology. And in a few years' time from now, I think we'll see that the governments are very much up to speed and are leaning into the efficiencies of the technology and making everyone's lives a lot easier. So certainly from a tax perspective, from a housing perspective, being able to buy properties such as real world assets, the tokenization of that, and speeding up all of those delays, which are headaches for communities and the everyday person, and that will be eradicated with the technology.
Definitely. I totally agree with you when it comes to, the beauty of technology. Isn't it kind of overlapping, combining the two words, traditional with digital? Are there any challenges and how can we overcome these challenges?
I think right now the challenges are perception. And it's the perception of the regulators that they are bad actors, so to speak, using the technology in a way that, and this is obviously not my beliefs, but it's, if you are trying to integrate someone who's very risk averse, which are the policymakers, which are the government agencies, they are going to be incredibly cautious. And if they don't understand it, they're going to be even more paranoid. So I think that that's where the problem comes from, is that they are immediately thinking of bad actors in the space, exploiting the technology for purposes that, maybe untoward. But because of the transparency of the technology and just the impenetrable nature of it to amend things, it's really just having that interface for them to be able to read the transactions on the blockchain. And once that has been merged, then the two worlds it will just work in harmony. But there still seems to be this perception that it's sort of an undercurrent of bad transactions that are being made on the blockchain, and as well as decentralized finance and cryptocurrencies. That is obviously slowly changing, and in fact, a much faster rate than it was in previous years. But still, there needs to be that bridging and that solidity where the two are very much intertwined, and the law enforcement and the regulators, as well as the courts, are very, very confident in the technology, and they're confident in the understanding between the parties that there's no malintention. And I think that's really where we're trying to achieve that this year. And most of the law enforcement agencies that I've spoken to, they're slowly starting to use wallets for decentralized finance. They're slowly starting to buy cryptocurrency, even if it is just a stable coin, to engage with the technology and understand how it works. You can't understand it, if you're not engaging with it and you're sitting in your armchair and looking at it from the outside. So those sort of appreciation and that kind of understanding it, they're way more open to it now, which is amazing, and partly because of the industries getting engaged with it, and they are proving the use cases. And those use cases are very positive. There's no bad actors there. It's really just speeding up all of the inefficiencies.
Yeah, perfect. I totally agree with that. And also, when it comes to the concept of decentralization and the importance of blockchain technology, what are a couple of use cases?
For example, the rental housing, just the real world assets of tokenizing the housing. If you want to buy a house, you'll be able to use that process in a matter of minutes, instead of months and months of going through a loan, as well as the deeds office, which will then register the property for you, transfer that property into your name. That can all be done really quickly with the blockchain. So that's one really powerful use case. The second use case is through the health sector, where they'll be able to give an electronic record of medical records and patients, and that is set in stone, that can't be changed or edited in any one way, which is also really important for fraud and making sure that your medical records are in your control. As the patient, you sometimes don't have access to those medical records, and they're not easily handed over to you. You have to go through a few hoops to get access to that. So the transparency of having that information and you being in control of your own data is really what the power of the technology is, and that filters through every industry. If you want to be in control of your digital twin, that is the best way to do it.
Become a part of the fastest growing world-class podcast of all time, Sci-Tech Swiss. With over 100,000 monthly views, Sci-Tech Swiss is making waves in the world of podcasting. Karina, over to you.
Become a sponsor for the next episode, or we produce one for you in our professional studio. Find us on premierswissmedia.com. How did you get involved with women in Web3 in Switzerland?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. It's an amazing story, actually. Every time I tell it, I get goosebumps. So I actually practice as a Web3 lawyer predominantly, and have been wanting to get into the space since I specialized in smart contracts back in 2016. And we have been kind of, molding out that path in South Africa and making sure that that's where I landed up. And over the holidays, I was on a Telegram group that had a few conferences, and I saw the Women in Web3 community. I decided to then reach out to the founder, Salama, and I asked her, if she was ever in Cape Town in South Africa, like I would love to assist her with one of her events and get to know her. And she responded and said she was in Cape Town. And I thought, well, what are the chances of that? Randomly found this message, and she happened to be, the stars just aligned, and she happened to be in Cape Town. So I jumped in my car and I went to go meet Salama, and we sat speaking for probably about an hour or two and got to know the sort of landscape in Africa as well as South Africa, and the discrepancy between where the tech is and where the people are, and how we're going to bridge that. And I landed up giving her a few insights, and she said she would love to build out her community here in Africa. And so I was appointed as the representative to then assist her in doing so. So in doing that, it's been an amazing experience to have touch points with all of these women from all over Africa, from Botswana to Kenya to obviously South Africa. And their stories that they've told and the use cases for the technology for them is very different to a first world country. The use cases for Web3 as well as cryptocurrencies in jurisdictions where it's very difficult to even go through a KYC process, that has changed their lives to be able to have a wallet and allow for the flow of funds to come straight through them to build their businesses or to receive funding. And that is, I think, really the most important part, is you don't need internet to receive those funds, and you don't have to go through a rigorous KYC process to purchase anything. So they are using stable coins in the most rural areas to be able to transact, and they are converting vouchers, which are points, into money in order for them to buy food, essentially, to put on the table. And they don't need to go through a bank or an intermediary to open up a bank account. Some people don't have identity books, they don't have passports, they don't have proof of residence, and so it's near impossible for them to open up a bank account. The unbanked community is large in Africa, and Web3 solutions that. So that's a massive part of the community, is that we're trying to educate those smaller offsets that are maybe in the rural areas or they're in the developing parts, but they need to be able to harness the technology to accelerate their purpose and get there faster.
And also focusing on, decentralized system in particular, how can we utilize this kind of on-chain laws for the decision-making process?
So yeah, that's a great question. And I think that's where the DAO, the Decentralized Autonomous Organization, is going to be incredibly useful, because that again allows for governance, and it's done in a way that is efficient and simple, and it's also a voting mechanism. And I think that it bridges so many worlds together. It's got the legal, it's got compliance, it's got governance, and as well as decision making, as well as transparency. So these are things that most companies don't have. So to be able to bring in that decentralized, even if it's just the principles of it, and maybe some companies or communities or individuals are not yet familiar with how to run a DAO, they can extract those principles and still infuse them in their day-to-day life, and make sure that they are keeping everything transparent and keeping everything neutral, and allowing for people to express their vote is essentially what it comes down to.
Definitely. And what are also a couple of applications, day-to-day applications that you might be using or that you might recommend, or also like a sort of experimentation to a day-to-day life?
Absolutely. So as a Web3 lawyer, I've been helping so many clients with their startups, and there've been a few that have really just hit me hard in terms of the functionality of it, and it's so important and so necessary. The one which it's very much in its early stages, but I think it's going to be integral to how people operate. It's actually about your will. And when you are going through that process of estate management, so many people don't know how to write a will, they don't know where to update it, and then they don't know what happens to that information when they pass on. Who is going to be taking over that? And blockchain and Web3 solutions that in a way that it creates a smart contract. So on the passing of, if you're the executor of an estate and someone has passed, it will trigger the smart contract on validation of the death certificate, because there's a lot of fraud with that as well. So that eradicates the fraud, and then allows for all of the terms in the will. So if there's obviously the inheritances and investments and all of those moving parts that people collect over a lifetime of their value, the smart contract will be able to allocate each of those inheritances to the right people. And the stats are so low across the globe about how many people don't have a will and how many people land up passing away intestate, which means that some of their assets and all of their hard-earned money goes to the government and it doesn't filter to the right people. So Web3 again solutions this for transparency and for eradicating fraud and for working with the governments in that way, because you need to work with each government to prove a birth certificate and a death certificate. So that's been one incredible piece of technology that I think is going to really, go leaps and bounds. Another project that I personally have also been working on is fractional investment, which with the technology, customers will be able to allow at the point of sale a fraction of their transaction fee to be invested into carbon offsetting and impact farming. So with the technology, the customer will be able to then see the full life cycle of their investment. They'll be able to watch exactly where their money is going and exactly how much money they've made and have full control over that. And I think that this is also important in a place like South Africa, as well as the rest of Africa, where people don't have access to investments. They don't realize that it can be done on a very small level. They're thinking investments cost, huge lump sums. But this is for your everyday customer who has a family to raise and school fees to pay for and a house to run, and they don't have that much disposable income. So at the point of sale, when you're buying your groceries, you'll be able to contribute a very small fraction of that to your investment. And over a year, if you're doing that every single day and you're tapping your card and you selecting yes to a transaction to be put in an investment, you're going to look back in a few years' time and say, well, geez, look at that. I've managed to make money off my own money. And that's really important for what we're trying to achieve, especially now where so many of the younger generations, they want transparency. They want to understand where their money is going. They don't believe in donations that go into thin air and they're not actually sure it lands up in the right hands. So the technology has just been insane with that in that regard. And the startups and the founders that are trying to solution this and use the technology to the best way possible, these are the things that really the legislators and the regulators need to get on top of, because these are the good use cases. This is where the technology shines, and it really outweighs any sort of bad actors that could potentially use the technology for any other reason.
Totally agree. I mean, I know that people are also using technology for, malicious reasons or,
Yes.
Exactly. It's another question that I'm actually asking to all my guests, and it's a very interesting question. Should we perceive technology as our friend or our enemy?
That's a brilliant question, and absolutely think that we should keep it as our friend. The technology, you have to evolve. As humans, we need to evolve, although I know we don't like change. I think that it's incredibly important, especially when you look at the younger generation. They are thriving for this kind of efficiency, thriving for this kind of technology, where they don't have to do all of the hoops and jumps and everything that we went through, or our parents went through, or their parents went through. This really allows for people to have beautiful lives. They can have balanced lives. The technology eradicates a lot of the laborious tasks. And that's not saying that people won't have jobs. Humans still need to work with the technology. That's absolutely not getting rid of anyone's job. I know that they were saying with AI, like there was a huge influx with lawyers in AI, but that you may not need a lawyer anymore. But there are certain parts that people need to engage with people. There's a trust element that you only receive by being face to face and having that human engagement. And I'm not saying that lawyers won't use the technology. We absolutely are, and we absolutely will, because it makes our jobs a lot easier and it creates cheaper fees. The service fees go down because you've got the technology assisting you, which gives more access to legal services. And the same goes for medical services, and the same goes for education. This is going to enhance, and it's going to allow for a vast number of people to have access. Whereas before it was only the cream of the crop, or a very small percentage of people who could afford all of those additional services, or the best type of those services. And absolutely, the technology is our friend.
It's also a matter of credibility, but at the same time, we also need someone to be able to interpret these kind of laws and to explain them to people.
Exactly. And I think that it really is, it's allowing for anyone from any background just to be able to do a quick Google search to get familiar with it. And if that includes downloading a wallet and playing around, getting the feel for what it, like how it functions, then that's going to make things a lot easier when you start looking at the technical side. And not everybody needs to know what's under the hood. You just need to know that it's working, and then you just need to know that it's faster, right? And that it's transparent. If you really do want to have a look and you want to understand more, it's absolutely accessible. You don't need to be a coder, and you don't need to be a developer. And I think that that's really a huge educational opportunity for people from all different backgrounds, that you don't have to have that skill set to be able to understand the use case of the technology.
Definitely. I totally agree with that, especially, speaking as a person who doesn't actually have a full background in tech, and at the same time, we need to keep up with technology.
So I think that this is really the opportunity is to change the perspective. And I think that's kind of the point that I was making in the beginning, is that if you're going to look for the bad actors in the technology space, which, I mean, they're bad actors in every industry, that is not absolutely the majority. And the majority of the people who are trying to build the technology in a way that is accessible and is in a transparent way for people to use without understanding the tech. They don't need to be coders. That's the part that's beautiful, and that's the part that should be focused on. And I think that the regulators and the legislators are very much understanding that, and their perception is slowly changing, which means everything is going to be a lot more fluid and a lot more effortless. And then the courts will get up to speed, and this is going to be our new normal.
So with that, thank you so much for your time. I think it was very, very fun and very interesting getting into the law system and learning, new terms and new things.
Absolutely. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much, Karina. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person soon.
Looking forward to that. Thank you so much. And to everyone, please stay tuned.